I'd give you a drink, a warm cup of tea with lemon and mint, a confetti cannon, roses from the garden, my favorite sweatshirt, a bed to lay in, homemade bread, a hand to hold. I'd give you my full attention. I'd give you my phone and say, put your number in. I'd give you the melody line, a standing ovation, a sense of security. I'd give you anything and everything if it made you believe that you were enough. Grace and peace, friends. I'm Pastor Tiffany, and that was a poem, Anything and Everything, by the Reverend Sarah Speed from A Sanctified Art, that's provided us again with some wonderful poetry and art week to meditate on as we prepare for the third Sunday in Lent. This week's meditation sets the stage for one of our more provocative gospel passages from the Gospel of John. Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. Their encounter tests the cultural norms of what sort of exchanges were acceptable between a man and a woman, between a Samaritan and a Jew. And as always, Jesus works through these tensions in a way that draws people into the promise of salvation rather than excluding them. And it all begins with a simple question: will you give me something to drink? This same question is at the center of our Old Testament passage for the week. The people of Israel were known to ask their God, will you give me something to drink? It's right out of Exodus 17, a story of Moses leading the tribes through the desert, lost and thirsting and begging for water as a sign from God. And so their story is what we'll focus on now in a Visio Divina practice, a visual prayer, looking at a piece of artwork called Wet Stones by Carmel Bogelin. Here's her statement. On a recent search to remedy dull kitchen knives, I found myself learning about wet stones. Sharpening a knife used to be called wetting, so to sharpen a blade was to wet it. Stones used for sharpening were called whetstones or a wet rock. Natural whetstones are typically formed of quartz, but today can be formed into pumice stones from all kinds of materials. And this interesting play on the words wet and stone led me to ask of this Exodus narrative, in focusing on their perceived lack, how had the Hebrews' trust in God begun to grow dull? In Exodus 17, we find the first encounter involving the Hebrews where a perceived lack of water, a necessary resource for survival, was in question. When the collective despair and threat of abandoning the journey to God's promised land is aroused, God aids Moses in providing water from rocks along their way. This fear of scarcity dulled the once sharpened faith of that community to the extent that they longed for their former life in Egypt, where the water was abundant but sipped under the oppression of slavery. How is it that seeking freedom could cost so much? Like the Hebrews in the wilderness, our fear of scarcity may cause us to struggle in our confidence in God's provision as we seek our own promises along life's journey. In seeking to quench our thirst, like the figures in this image, perhaps we may find the provision of God in the grace of relief and from unexpected places and experiences that sharpen our faith. As you look at this artwork, take in the color and the contrast. Breathe and allow your eyes to follow the curve of the lines. Become still pray with your eyes upon this image and on the images of your own experience, thoughts, and feelings that connect with the story behind this picture. In what ways do you perceive yourself to be lacking? In what sense have you become dull in your once sharpened faith? Where do you experience scarcity or thirst? As I think about this question, will you give me something to drink? So simple and so common. I wonder how often we quench our thirsts on water so easily obtained from our kitchen faucet or that chilled filtered dispenser on the front of the refrigerator. We drink and think nothing of it, or consider the millions of people in our world and right here in our own neighborhoods who lack easily available, clean, drinkable water. What would you give for God to quench your thirst? And what would you be willing to give or do so that all could have access to clean, drinkable water?